Hello friends and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. Have I got lipstick on my teeth? Probably. I have noticed I've got multiple comments from people asking me to start using an external mic because of sound issues. I was not aware of this because the sound when I'm editing sounds absolutely fine, and then when I watch it on YouTube it's great. But it is not great for you. So I have an external mic now. I don't know how to use it. Howell's got COVID. So today I'm not using one, but in the interim, Howell has showed me how to remove interference and enhance my voice in the edit. So we're going to see if that makes things better. The Online Safety Act is coming into place in the UK on the 25th of July. So by the time you're watching this, it will have happened. And the idea of it is to protect children by making it harder for them to access pornographic material because they're going to check the age of people who visit adult sites. This sounds like an excellent thing on paper, and in theory I am totally in agreement. I don't want children seeing porn, but that's not really what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is the kind of discourse that is going on around this subject. I watched Newsnight last night, huge British BBC programme, and they were discussing the Online Safety Act. They were discussing specifically how it was going to stop children watching porn, and there was a panel of people talking about this, and I was not invited. No pornographer was invited, no porn performer was invited, no porn producer was invited, no porn customer was invited, although obviously there was a porn customer on the panel because about 52% of us at a conservative estimate view porn. So in a panel of 4, one of those people at least has viewed porn. It's so frustrating. So what I thought we would do is we would watch this programme, this Newsnight, together. And since they didn't have the courtesy to invite me to it, I'll just keep pausing the video and inserting myself into the discourse. I am looking forward to being on Newsnight. Hope you enjoy my performance. Thanks for listening. Right, let's get started. I've never done this before. This is extremely exciting to me. I've just learned how to screen record. At the moment I don't know how to edit it, so it's in the bottom of the screen, but I'm thinking maybe doing this will help. I'm hoping it's going to be here. I don't know how to do this. How exciting. But let's get started. All right, Victoria, Derbyshire, what are you going to say?
Here, on Friday, new rules come in requiring all sites with pornographic content to enforce age verification in an attempt to stop under 18s viewing pornography online. Will those new rules work? Here are some young people with their own thoughts.
I was first exposed to pornography probably in the classroom with my mates on their phones.
It's people in school and stuff are playing like pornographic videos for the shock factor.
I do remember this. It's so unfortunate. So I was at high school. I was a teenager in the early 1990s, and I remember this. So this was pre-internet, but I'm sure a lot of us can attest to the desire of teenagers to gross each other out. So it's not like anyone showed me anything lovely. I mean, it was like teenagers went straight to the most extreme stuff they could, and it wasn't because it was sexy, it was because it was funny. So yeah, I'm with this young man. God.
That was not me seeking it out, so it must have been when I was like 12 or 13. But then if it was actually from my own personal usage, I guess I must have been about 14 or 15.
When I first saw pornography, it wasn't by searching for it, it was something that had popped up as I was scrolling on Twitter.
That's horrible.
When you're a teenager, it's almost weird not to, or almost seen as weird amongst like your peers to not have been exposed to it as opposed to being exposed.
I agree. Like maybe less in terms of porn and more in terms of actual having sexual contact. I was called frigid from like the age of 12 for not having had sex, and like looking back, I'm sure most of my classmates hadn't had sex at that age. But yeah, the shaming about being sexually immature or not being ready to look at sexually explicit material, I absolutely agree that that was an issue when I was at school, and I'm sure it's more so an issue now.
All of my friends, when they were getting into their first relationships, sometimes they would get asked to do things that they didn't know about, or that they were too scared to try. You're expected to have the sexual know-how of a porn star when you're about 12 or 13.
That makes me very sad to hear. I mean, I remember the people I knew at secondary school who were being sexually active back in the early 90s. They were also being put under pressure to do stuff that maybe they didn't want to do for fear of being called frigid. That's certainly true, and I guess that online porn has made it even easier to shame people for not doing certain acts. What makes me quite happy though is to hear a young person saying, we were asked to do stuff we didn't want to do and that was unacceptable, because that feels like social progress actually, that people are much more aware of the issue of consent than they were back in the mid-90s, and that just seems like a very good thing. So although she's talking about a bad experience, I'm happy to hear that it sounds like young women of her generation are aware that that's the problem and that they shouldn't have to do stuff that a porn star's doing just because they've seen it depicted on screen.
Young women that I know have had some really difficult first experiences of sex experiences where they've acquired bruises or experienced choking, which is a really big topic at the moment. But because they think that that's normal, they think that that's okay, when in reality it's not. And that's because pornography sets so much of what we think is normal.
I have to say, in 21 years as a pornographer, I haven't seen anything that I've considered to be choking porn. Obviously, what counts as choking porn is probably a rather subjective measure. So I don't feel like it's as prevalent as we are hearing people say it is, but it's certainly something that people seem to have a very visceral reaction to if they see it. And certainly it is an activity that if you do it in real life, it has some very real, very significant risks. So I can see why people are worried about it. On the other hand, again, 21 years in the industry, I don't know a single person who's ever been damaged by doing anything choking related at a photo shoot, and obviously I know an awful lot of porn performers, so I'm hesitant to accept the idea that there's an awful lot of actual choking in porn, because I feel like if there was, I'd know some people who'd been injured, and I don't, despite having a huge number of very frank conversations over the years. On the other hand, I do know people outside porn who have had adverse experiences with this, so it's certainly a social problem. I'm not honestly sure whether it's really a popular porn thing, because as I say, I inhabit the world of porn and I have never seen it. Fair enough, I've not gone looking for it because it seems like quite a disturbing genre to me. It's not really to my taste. I might like playing with it in private, or at least with the idea of it, but the idea of seeing someone else appearing to be choked is really distressing to me. I do wonder if it's become the kind of political hot potato because people have gone hunting for the worst porn they can find. I don't think this panic, specifically about choking porn, is particularly representative of what is in your average porn film, which I'll talk more about later. That's not to say that we shouldn't address it, but I do think it's possibly being rather overstated.
To an extent, a ban or a limit would always do something.
Young people are incredibly tech savvy, especially, I'm 20 years old now, but people younger than me, I think, wow, they've been brought up around iPads and iPhones in particular, they will absolutely be able to find their way around.
That's a good thing to reduce just make it less accessible for people, or especially young people. I mean, older people, things like VPNs, people are still going to find pornography.
People looking for porn always find it, and we should be even more worried if people are starting to turn to dark corners of the internet, which are unmoderated and unregulated.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point.
Shortly, I'll be discussing this with our panel this evening. Former Conservative leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, is with
Not a pornographer.
us tonight, as is General Secretary of the trade union Unison, Christina Mcanea.
Also, no industry experience of being a pornographer.
But first, an independent review into online pornography was published earlier this year by Conservative peer Baroness Gabby.
So, panel of poor people. Not a single pornographer. Just why? Just why? It might be because they don't want to hear what we've got to say, but you at least have to admit that we might have some relevant knowledge.
Bertin, who is here, thank you for being with us. I mean, you just heard those young people. If people want to find pornography and they happen to be under 18, they'll just use a VPN. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's not going to be foolproof. And I think, in fairness, the regulators and the government always knew that. But if it does stop children accidentally finding porn, and I think one young person said that it's going to make it more difficult, that has to be a good thing. But my point on this is this.
I agree with her on that. I find it quite hard to get particularly passionate about, a 17-year-old who is already sexually active, who wants to look at the sort of porn they already are aware that they like because they're already having a sex life. They already know what sex acts interest them. I find it hard to get particularly concerned about them seeing it because clearly by that age they are sexually mature enough to be having sex. They are sexually mature enough to be seeking this stuff out. I sort of assume that that might mean that they're ready to cope with what they see. But the idea of people accidentally stumbling across porn is really upsetting because although I don't think I stumbled across anything accidentally, I was shown some by people who were, I think, trying to bully me with it. I did accidentally see some stuff in TV and films that really upset me, both sexual and in terms of violence. I just wasn't ready for it. I'd grown up in a cult, so I'd not seen a lot of TV and film, so I was very, very sensitive to it, both in that I thought it was amazing, but also it felt very real to me. So I experienced significant distress as a result of accidentally being exposed to stuff that I really wasn't ready for. So yeah, I'm sympathetic to this idea.
This is the tip of the iceberg. You know, age verification is the very beginning, the smallest part that you have to do on this. You have got to look at the online pornography industry. You've got to regulate it.
And what a great way to do that it would be if you spoke to some of us. What a good idea that would be. I cannot think of another industry, except maybe like drug dealing, when you would discuss the industry without having representatives of the industry. It's mind-blowing to me.
More, you've got to scrutinise it more. Let's be clear, there is a huge amount of content on there, hugely abusive, violent, misogynistic content that would not be legal offline.
Right. This is where she starts to become quite controversial to me. Because in professionally produced porn, I'm struggling to think of any illegal acts that get shown. We're already not allowed to show anything with weapons, even fake weapons. We're not allowed to show anyone appearing to lose consciousness. Certainly not allowed to show anyone who appears to be dead. We're not allowed to show blood. So actual violent acts that would be illegal in real life if you saw them on the high street are absolutely illegal in porn. So this is a really odd point that she's making.
That's not going to be dealt with by the Online Safety Act as a whole.
No, I mean, this is the point. So my review came up with 32 recommendations, and the sort of key recommendation within that is that you have to get parity between what was legal offline, which the BBFC would classify.
Okay, so it's becoming clearer. She's not talking about what would be illegal or legal to do on the high street. So she's not saying that porn should be held to the same standards as the law regarding what private individuals are allowed to do in real life. So I'm glad she's not trying to say that, because we're already bound by the same laws. If you're not allowed to do it in real life, you are definitely not allowed to do it in a porn film. But now I discover that's not what she means. She means that we should be held to the same standards mainstream film and TV is held to the same standards as the BBFC. And that is a whole different matter, because that would be wonderful. Because if we were to be held to the same standards as the BBFC, we would be able to show weapons, because you're allowed to show weapons in even like PG rated movies. We would be able to show blood. Not that I want to, but we would be able to. We'd be able to depict non-consensual acts if the performers were consenting. We'd be able to show people pass out or be asleep. We'd be allowed to show people with swords. Oh my God, if what she actually wants is parity between the porn industry and the mainstream film industry, that would be an absolute gift to professional pornographers like me. As it is, we are held to far stricter standards. And I'm not saying that necessarily is wrong, because one thing about porn is it's often being done by very small scale productions. So keeping people safe when something is very small scale and you don't have a whole load of union representatives there to look after you, it is possibly harder than on a mainstream film set. So that's a different discussion to have. But to hear her say that, it shows such ignorance from her about what pornographers are actually going through in terms of compliance. If we just had to keep to the same rules of what we're allowed to show as movies that are shown after 9 p.m. on BBC, that would be absolutely amazing. Good Lord.
Say there were very strict guidelines around what could be produced and what couldn't be produced, and that has not transcended over to online law, and that had...
It has. I mean, it's been done by MasterCard and Visa rather than the actual law. I mean, there is the Extreme Porn Law and the Obscene Publications Act, but in practice, because Visa and MasterCard have handed down such draconian rules about what we're allowed to show, yeah, it is absolutely translated over to porn. Far more so than in mainstream.
It has to change immediately.
Why do you think it hasn't transcended?
Well, because it wasn't it wasn't drafted with that in mind, in truth. So it's, you know, this is another example of where regulation and the law has just not kept pace with the reality of what people are doing. And I think it's very important to emphasise the scale of this. It's 13.8 million people regularly watch porn. That is almost a third of all adult males watch pornography in this country regularly. So this is not sort of...
It's actually, I think it's a lot more than that. The last statistic I saw was over half of us. So she's kind of saying it's like 1 in 6, I guess, if it's 1 in 3 males. I think it is quite a lot more than that. But, okay, fair enough. I will accept what she said.
Niche sport, this is not something that can't be looked at properly. It would be unthinkable for the tobacco industry, for the gambling industry, for the drinks industry not to be regulated and scrutinised properly. This is a high harm industry.
What? Okay, so I was about to agree with her because, yes, I think that it's absolutely true that this is a large industry. The individual people working in the industry are often really small time because a lot of us are shooting niche content, but the industry as a whole is large. But rather than saying, oh, that's why it's such a big problem, I would say that's why it's such an important service, because, in my opinion, about half of us are watching this stuff. So actually protecting people's access to it, given that it's clearly valuable enough to a large enough number of people that it is being accessed on this scale, yeah, I would say it's not like banning fox hunting that will affect a few thousand people. If we were to make it impossible for British people to view porn, for example, which is not happening at the moment, but it sounds like she'd quite like it to happen, that would affect half of us, or even by her estimation, it would affect a sixth of us, which is huge. Oh, a high harm industry. Now, and the fact that no one's going to challenge that because there's no one on this TV sofa who works in our industry. A high harm industry to whom? Because your average porn star these days in the UK is an OnlyFans model working at home on her own. She's shooting solo content. She's not being choked. No one's even having sex with her because it's solo. Your average piece of pornographic content is solo. Most porn performers who fall under this umbrella of adult online content, you have to remember that most of them are not even shooting hardcore. Most of them are by themselves, self-shooting on a phone, shooting whatever content they feel like. So when you say porn as a whole is a high harm industry, it certainly is not high harm to the performers, although the stigma certainly does cause some harm. So is it high harm to the consumers? Well, that is a very controversial thing to say. I mean, I'd say it might well harm people who are not mature enough to view it yet. Like, I think that pornography could harm children, but pornographers are not producing their work to be accessed by children. Firstly, because we're not psychopaths, and most of us have children we love in our families. It's not like we are a group of people completely divorced from the idea of caring about children and their well-being. But also, there's no point having children viewing your work because they're not going to pay you for it, are they? Because they don't have credit cards. That's not the reason I don't want kids to view my work. That's not my primary reason. The primary reason is it's not for them. But also, there is no pornographer I've ever met who's like, oh, I'd really love some children to watch my work, because we're not insane, but also they're not going to pay us. Oh God, it's such an incredibly basic, simple point, and no one on this sofa is going to make this point.
And it needs to be dealt with properly.
Can I come back to age verification? As I said, the new rules coming in on Friday. I want to ask you specifically about X. You have to be 13 to be on X.
That is shocking to me, honestly. I mean, I know that for years and years and years, at least a decade, any adult performer on Twitter has been shadow banned to hell, so you can't just find them. And also we all put up mature content warning on our work, so I would have hoped that would stop a child from stumbling across my Twitter stuff. Having discovered this has made me feel a lot less comfortable with putting up automatic previews of my porn work, because I do not want 13-year-olds watching it. That seems incredibly irresponsible, that any social media platform would allow adults and children just to all use the same thing. Yeah, I don't really think Twitter is a good place for a 13-year-old. Not only because of the porn, but, oh God, because of the potential for cyberbullying. Yeah, that is quite shocking to me.
You can now see pornography on X. It is freely available. Elon Musk changed it so pornography can feature on it.
They're not going to mention the tube sites. I don't know why. In my experience, when people of that generation talk about it, they always mention Pornhub. It's the tube sites they looked at, because on Twitter, I guess you can see, a still image, or you can see a 20-second preview or something. But of course on Pornhub, X-Hamster, all of those sites, you can see full hardcore videos if you want. So it's not surprising to me at all. I asked my removal men, because they weren't at all shocked by all the equipment that they were moving, all of my and Howell's fetish stuff. And I apologised to them because I thought it might be a bit shocking. And I remember them saying, oh, we all grew up watching Pornhub, so nothing shocks us. And so that got me interested. And so whenever I got into a conversation with someone of that sort of age group, I would ask them, and they would say, Pornhub.
Is X going to comply with these new age verification?
Well, we'll have to see on Friday, but it's certainly true that social media firms, and X in particular, have been the place where most young people have found pornography. And I think parents...
Yeah, I don't actually think that's true. I don't think it's social media. I think it's tube sites, for the reason that I just said, because you can watch full videos on there. And also, there are mature content warnings on social media. So I don't think it's massively likely you're going to stumble across porn by accident on Twitter. But until this year, there was no warning on Pornhub. The first page you get to, the landing page, was just hardcore porn. They've now changed it, probably because of the law change, but they didn't do anything voluntarily to protect children from seeing porn, whereas Twitter at least has the shadow banning and the having to report whether you're posting mature content or not.
When they discovered this, have been absolutely shocked and appalled. Nobody really was aware that was going on, and I think that is something that well, if they are not going to address it by Friday, then they should face the full force of Ofcom's regulations, business disruption fines, and they should not hesitate to act quickly on that. And I think I would also say that it's very troubling that we also see another one of Elon Musk's products, Grok AI, creating sort of companions that are often children, and very quickly the conversations become sexualised, and often conversations where they're interpreting, relations, incestual relations between fathers and young daughters.
Okay, this is outside my area here. So Grok AI she's talking about. And I think she's talking about people being able to talk to an AI who will then sort of mimic an underage person. I think that's what she's saying. So people are sort of sexting with AIs who are kind of acting like they're children. Don't quote me on this. I have to say, it's distasteful. The idea is distasteful. But actually, I would definitely rather someone with those kind of inclinations. I would much rather they were talking to Grok than to an actual child. So that seems a bit of an odd red herring, really. I don't really see where she's going with that.
Is that true? Is that true?
Reports would suggest so,
right.
And the government have to act very, very quickly on that. The damage with these kinds of fast-reaching technology and fast developing technology, you can't wait 5 years for review, 5 years for
Absolutely.
Legislation. You have to get going with it immediately.
I should say the Science and Technology Secretary, Peter Kyle, will be on the programme on Thursday. Your report talks about the rise of deep fake pornography, which is when pornography is created by altering or manipulating images of someone's face or body. That has now become illegal to do it without someone's consent. Penny Mordaunt, I want to bring you in here because this has happened to you. Tell our audience what happened.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend that. It's absolutely disgusting. It's horrible. It's weaponised against female politicians. I don't think I'm going to have any argument with what Penny Mordaunt says.
Not a week has gone by in my parliamentary career when something of this nature hasn't happened. But I think it's just important to say at the outset that despite all of that, as Nick will verify, I'm desperate to get back into Parliament. The upsides of the job far outweigh the downsides of being in the public eye. But yes, this is one aspect of it. I was a victim of. I learnt this from an investigation that Cathy Newman carried out, and my face had been used, an AI porn generated deepfake porn. It happened to a number of parliamentarians. And I would ask people behind this, you know, don't they realise the consequences in the real world when they do something like that? Because although I haven't seen this myself, it was deliberately humiliating and violent.
I mean, awful, nothing but sympathy for her. I'd question the kind of conflation of porn produced by pornographers who are hiring consenting performers. I mean, it's an entirely different issue. No, this is just disgusting.
And that plays across into the real world. It plays across into people taking actual real world actions against ourselves. And that has happened to me. It's happened to a lot of my colleagues. And
interesting, though, that if we were to work hard on destigmatising pornography, then doing deepfake porn as an attempt to humiliate someone would be less effective if we weren't so judgmental about the images in the first place.
I do think, I mean, the worry for me is actually more with children.
Yes.
And we wouldn't want people to see these things on the walk to school. If they did, they'd be in therapy. But we have seemed to be perfectly happy for them to see it online. And so I'm with the
I don't think
Australians
anyone's happy with that. I don't think anyone normal is happy with that.
And we need to recognise the real harm this is doing to young
And when you say you're with the Australians, you mean social media ban for under 16s?
I would ban certain social media platforms, and I think...
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea, I must say. I can see how growing up in this world, not being able to use social media would feel like you were missing out on basically the world. I don't like the idea of vulnerable children being on social media, more because of cyberbullying, because we're just discovering how widespread that is. That concerns me more than porn, but I don't have any children who have come to me and said, "Mummy, I've just seen some horrible porn." So I'm maybe not in the best position to judge how much that is happening on social media, because I know that all my peers have marked their content as for a mature audience only, but I don't know what a 12-year-old's user experience on Twitter is like. I can't pretend that I do.
The government needs to have some courage here in addressing these issues with people like Elon Musk. You know, that man is taking the human race to Mars. I'm sure he can figure out age verification and what needs to follow from that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the last government started the process of the online safety bill and didn't want to ban social media for under 16s. Christina Mcanea, does it feel like this government is taking on the big private tech firms to you?
I do think that at least requiring age verification for the big social media platforms, there's less potential stigma involved if your information gets out. Because the problem with age verification for porn sites is that if your information is leaked, it tells people what your sexual identity is in a way that is potentially devastating for you. So we saw people killing themselves when the Ashley Madison leak happened a few years ago. Whereas if you are having to verify your age to use Twitter and that information is leaked, all it says is that you like to shout at people about politics on the internet, which is less potentially shaming generally. So yeah, the age verification for social media does seem a lot less problematic in terms of potential privacy violation than asking people to sign in before they look at the specific sort of porn that appeals to them.
Or effectively?
None I've seen so far, but I completely agree with what my colleagues have said here. I think you have to challenge those people who are providing this and the platforms that people have been able to access it.
Oh God, I would love one of them to say we need to challenge Pornhub. I don't know how hard it is to block some websites in the UK. Obviously everyone can get around it with a VPN, but it does seem to me that a lot of this problem could have been headed off over a decade ago if they'd just paid some attention to the fact that platforms were popping up with stolen porn content. So people were stealing porn from behind paywalls of producers like me, putting it up on Pornhub, Xhamster, all of those sites. It was free to view for the first time ever. Once upon a time there were kind of message boards for pirates and they'd swap files, but Pornhub et al. Made that into a full-scale industry. And if we tackled that at the time and we'd kept porn properly behind paywalls, we wouldn't be in this situation now. I really wish one of them would mention that, because it could have been tackled, and I think it maybe still could be tackled.
And, you know, it's exactly that point that Penny just made. If these are people who say they're the smartest people in the world, they run tech that can provide all sorts of things, this cannot be beyond the wit of them to actually stop it happening.
Well, it's definitely not beyond the wit of them.
Of course
to
it's
stop it
not.
happening. So the question then is, why are they not stopping it happening?
So there has to be
Because it makes-
penalties. The government has to introduce severe penalties on these organisations to make it worth their while to stop doing this. Another point I think that needs to be looked at this as well is particularly the young men that are accessing this. One of the things that I think needs to get properly invested in, and I think there are moves to do this, is to look at the way relationships are taught about in schools and how we deal with things like misogyny and respect for women and girls in schools.
I've got two boys. They've just been through state school. One's just waiting for his A-level results, fingers crossed. They had PSHE throughout the whole of secondary school. I mean...
Yeah, I agree. I think modern sex and social education is doing a really good job.
It's really
what
good,
I've heard.
I have to say. There's a lot of talk about respect and consent and what extreme pornography can do to a young brain. It's, you know, it's not going to work with everybody, but it is happening.
But I think it does. If you are saying in sort of at schools this is bad and you're giving good education, that is obviously a great thing. But if at the same time you're allowing this sort of subterranean world where anything goes, and
of course, subterranean world, Jesus, it's such stigmatizing language. It's not a subterranean world. We're all paying tax. We're all highly regulated, albeit by Visa and /MasterCard rather than the government. Subterranean is so offensive. Oh my God, it's just... Oh my God. And like, all they need is a porn performer sitting on the sofa to challenge comments like that. It would be so good.
And that there are, you know, basically no standards, no regulation,
Rubbish,
no scrutiny.
nonsense.
You know, I think the law
Nonsense.
has to be bumped up. I think extreme pornography has to be added to. Certain things now need to be put into that bucket.
Like what?
What is illegal? Certainly strangulation, pornography and depictions of, which the government have said they will do.
Why though? Because she said we should just stick to the same rules as the BBFC are allowed to show strangulation in mainstream movies. I don't necessarily think that we should be doing strangulation all over our porn films, but that is an absurd argument. That's completely inconsistent with what she's already said. God.
It needs to go in there immediately, as does, I'm afraid, incest pornography, as awful as that sounds.
Why? Again, if you really want to hold us to the same standards as the BBFC, like depictions of incest are all over mainstream cinema, all over. Forrest Gump, Jesus.
But that is purporting a lot of content that is now encouraging child sexual abuse. There is so much worrying stuff.
Encouraging child sexual abuse? What does that mean? There's a lot of content encouraging child sexual abuse. I wonder if she means like models in school uniforms, which I do sometimes, but I really don't see how that would encourage child sexual abuse, a 48-year-old in a school uniform. I'm not saying she's necessarily wrong, because I don't know what she's thinking of. I don't know what she's seen that's given her that impression. But just that it's not being challenged by someone in the industry with experience of what we're actually shooting, that's really infuriating. And again, the rules about depiction of childhood are just getting stricter and stricter all the time. There's an awful lot of stuff I just have to say no to because it's unpublishable. And I'm not talking about incredibly shocking acts. I've just had a video taken down where I was threatening a full-grown man. It was a POV style video, so I was just talking to the camera. My customer wanted me to force him to suck on a giant dummy because he was my employee and I wanted to humiliate him. The video's been taken down for the depiction of an underage child. I mean, there is no depiction of an underage child. I'm the only person in the video and I'm playing a headmistress, and the person I'm speaking to, the POV character, is a full-grown man. But even so, it's been taken down, and honestly, I mean, it doesn't seem particularly fair, but I've not got any particular argument with it. I don't care. But she doesn't seem to believe that any of this censorship is happening, and it really, really is.
On there. So I think that you've got to get the education right, but you also can't just allow anything goes on these sites.
And would that help with the Labour government's aim of halving violence?
Anything does not go on these sites. If you're talking about the legal paywalled content, like clips for sale, like ManyVids, like OnlyFans, anything does not go. So is she talking about Pornhub? In that case, like, that is a separate conversation. The lack of recognition that tube sites are operating in an extremely different way from like traditional pay sites is really frustrating. And you know, latterly, actually, Pornhub has come in for quite a bashing from Visa and MasterCard, and they have cleaned up their act. But this is all stuff that it would be great if I would be allowed onto the sofa. It would be nice to be able to talk about these things.
Against women and girls.
Well, I personally think so. I think that you can't. This is a huge issue around prevention, and I think that if you don't tackle this kind of content, then you're not really serious about halving that figure. And I think it would be incredibly disappointing if some of the recommendations I put forward are not do not feature.
Violence, including sexual violence towards women and girls, has been endemic for hundreds and hundreds of years. And as a general rule, it has decreased in the last 100 years or so, and has decreased further since online pornography became available around the year 2000. The statistics are rather muddied, as far as I can see, by the fact that reporting is also up, because a lot of women who once wouldn't have bothered to report are beginning to feel emboldened now in the post-Me Too era. So it's a little bit difficult to say. And obviously trying to reduce violence against women and girls or anybody is always a laudable thing to do. I'm just not really sure that the data really supports doing this specific thing about it, as opposed to figuring out why so few rape trials end up with a conviction. Oh my god. So, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm feeling on more shaky ground than normal. Usually when I talk about anything on my YouTube channel, it's because I feel fully expert on the subject, which obviously when I'm talking about professional modelling or being a BDSM performer, or generally, I feel like I'm pretty safely in the saddle. With this, it's such a complicated issue, and the statistics around it can be so confusing because they can be so contradictory. It is quite difficult to know what really the answer is, because protecting children from seeing stuff that they're not ready to see is important. It's just that also protecting the rights of legal adults to enjoy the sort of entertainment that they want to see, including erotic entertainment, is also important. And also the rights of the large hundreds and thousands of quite often young women who work in this industry, who've quite often come from suboptimal backgrounds, whether they come from some sort of deprivation or chaotic parenting environment, or, you know, a religious cult like me. A lot of them really haven't had the opportunities to launch the sort of businesses that you can launch if your education was excellent, if you had very supportive parents, if you had family money to sink into starting the sort of business that costs more to start up, or if your parents have like fantastic professional contacts. There are a lot of industries that are a lot more difficult to get into if you don't have the right advantages. Not to say it's impossible, but porn is one of the ones where you can be successful despite lack of formal qualifications and despite not knowing people in high places. Pornography is a relatively meritocratic industry compared to a lot of others, and it is one where some women really thrive economically, but also a lot of pornographers are very happy because people who have agency often are quite happy. So I just really wish that porn performers got to sit on the sofa more often than we do. So I have inserted myself. I hope you've enjoyed that. I apologise for any errors I might have made. If I pick up on any while I'm editing, I will put in additional notes. It is a really complex subject. I just really wanted to add my voice because there should be a voice of a porn performer in discussions like this, and I don't understand why we keep being left out. Thanks as always for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'll be back with more next month. Maybe I'll have a microphone because maybe my husband will have recovered from COVID. Now I'm going to go and talk to my best friend on the phone. Bye for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.